What secrets lie beneath the bronze helmets and crimson cloaks of ancient Sparta? What was it really like to live under the most militaristic society the world has ever known? Tonight, we'll uncover the brutal reality behind the legendary 300 warriors who stood at Thermopylae. Explore the forgotten stories of the helots who suffered in silence. Examine the archaeological mysteries that still puzzle historians today, and discover how Spartan women wielded power in ways that would shock the ancient world. Welcome back to Boring History for Sleep, where we explore the fascinating, often overlooked details of our shared human past. Before we begin our journey to ancient Laconia, I'm curious, where are you checking in from tonight? What time is it where you are? Perhaps you're settling in for the evening, or maybe you're on the other side of the world greeting a new day with history as your companion. If you truly enjoy these lengthy explorations into boring history, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. You're an important part of our growing community of history lovers, and your continued support means everything to us. In the comments, let me know what historical topic you'd like us to explore next, or simply check in and say hello. Your suggestions often inspire our future journeys into the past. Now, as we prepare to march alongside the Spartans, you might want to turn the lights down low, perhaps put on a fan for some gentle background noise, and settle in for a comfortable journey back to the 5th century BCE. Let the modern world fade away as we step into the harsh, unforgiving landscape of ancient Sparta, where every moment of life was dictated by the demands of war. Why I too sucked to be a Spartan warrior. Picture yourself born into ancient Sparta around 480 BCE, the same generation that would face the Persian invasion at Thermopylae. From the moment you draw your first breath, your life belongs not to yourself, not to your family, but to the state. You are not an individual with hopes and dreams. You are a weapon in training, a cog in the most ruthlessly efficient military machine the ancient world has ever produced. If you're male and born with any physical defect, any sign of weakness, your story ends before it begins. The elders of your tribe examine you with the cold calculation of livestock inspectors. A clubfoot, a withered arm, even unusual frailty could mean being cast into the apothecary, the rocky chasm outside the city where unwanted infants were left to die. This isn't cruelty for its own sake. It's the iron logic of a society that cannot afford weakness. Every mouth must be fed, every body must serve, and in Sparta, service means warfare. Assuming you pass this first brutal test, your early years offer little of what we might recognize as childhood. While other Greek children play games and learn from their parents, you're already being conditioned for hardship. Spartan children are deliberately underfed, not from poverty, but from policy. Hunger makes you resourceful, makes you steal, makes you cunning. If you're caught stealing, you're punished not for the theft itself, but for being caught. The lesson is clear. Competence matters. Failure brings pain. At age 7, if you're a boy, you're torn from your family and thrust into the agoge, the state education system that will dominate the next 13 years of your life. Imagine the terror of a 7-year-old child suddenly surrounded by strangers. Sleeping on a bed of reeds, you must gather yourself from the banks of the Eurotas River. The beds are deliberately uncomfortable, meant to toughen your body for the ground you'll sleep on during military campaigns. The thin kitten you wear is your only clothing, summer and winter alike. While other Greek cities pride themselves on their clothing and comfort, you shiver through mountain winters and swelter through valley summers in the same rough garment. Your head is shaved bald, marking you clearly as a student in the agoge. This isn't just about hygiene, it's about stripping away individual identity. You are no longer little Cleomenes or Alcibiades. You are simply another Spartan in training. The older boys themselves, products of this same system, take pleasure in making your life miserable. They beat you for infractions, both real and imagined. They steal your already meager food rations, forcing you to learn that survival depends on your own cunning and strength. The instruction you receive focuses almost entirely on physical training and warfare. While Athens produces philosophers, poets, and playwrights, Sparta produces soldiers. You learn to march in formation until your feet are bloody, to handle sword and spear until your hands are permanently calloused, to endure pain until your face shows no expression at all. Reading and writing are taught, but only the basics necessary for military communication. Music and dancing are part of your education, but even these serve military purposes, training, coordination, and rhythm for battle formations. The food is deliberately awful and scarce. The infamous black broth, a mixture of pork stock, vinegar, and salt, becomes your primary sustenance. Ancient sources tell us it was so terrible that a visitor from Sybaris, tasting it, declared that now he understood why Spartans were so eager to die in battle. Hunger is your constant companion, gnawing at your stomach, making you lightheaded during the endless training sessions. But this too serves a purpose. A hungry soldier fights harder, steals more effectively, and doesn't depend on supply lines that might be cut. As you grow older in the agoge, the tests become more sophisticated and more dangerous. The cryptia, the secret service training that some boys undergo, requires you to spend months hiding in the mountains with nothing but a knife and your wits. Your mission is to spy on the Helot population, the enslaved peoples who vastly outnumber the Spartan citizens. More sinisterly, you're expected to kill Helots who show signs of potential leadership or rebellion. These aren't hardened criminals or enemy soldiers. They're often young men not much older than yourself, whose only crime was being born into slavery in Sparta. The psychological toll of the cryptia cannot be overstated. You're training to kill not in the heat of battle, but in cold blood, from ambush, against victims who have no chance to defend themselves. This creates the kind of ruthless mindset that Sparta needs in its warriors. But it also creates a society where empathy is seen as weakness, where mercy is viewed as failure. Your relationship with pain becomes intimate and complex. The diamastagosis, a ritual flogging competition, forces boys to endure savage beatings while maintaining absolute silence and composure. Parents and spectators watch as you're whipped until your back is raw and bleeding. Crying out or showing weakness brings shame not just on you, but on your entire family line. Some boys die during these contests, and they're honored as heroes who chose death over dishonor. The sexual relationships within the agoge add another layer of complexity to your existence. Older warriors take younger students as lovers, relationships that are both educational and exploitative. Your erastes, your older male lover, is responsible for your military education and moral development. But you have no choice in this relationship, no power to refuse, no voice in how you're treated. These relationships are institutionalized and expected, but they're also based on the complete submission of the younger partner. As you near the end of your agoge training, around age 20, you face new challenges that test everything you've learned. You must prove yourself capable of leadership, of making life and death decisions under pressure, of inspiring other warriors to follow you into certain death if necessary. The final tests often involve actual combat, not mere training exercises. You might be sent to patrol disputed border regions where you'll face real enemies with real weapons who want to kill you. Your diet remains deliberately poor even as you approach manhood. The constant hunger has stunted your growth compared to other Greeks. Archaeological evidence suggests that Spartan men were typically shorter and leaner than their contemporaries from other city-states. This isn't the impressive physical specimen that Hollywood depicts, but a wiry, scarred, underfed warrior whose strength comes from endurance rather than bulk. The transition to full citizenship at age 20 doesn't bring relief from hardship, it merely changes its nature. You're now expected to marry, but you cannot live with your wife. You continue to mess with your military unit, sleeping in communal barracks, eating the same terrible food, maintaining the same rigid discipline that has shaped your entire life. Your wedding night is literally a stolen moment, a brief encounter in darkness before you return to your brothers in arms. Your wife has been prepared for marriage through her own brutal education system. Spartan women undergo physical training that would be considered scandalous in other Greek cities. They exercise naked, compete in athletic contests, and develop the kind of physical strength that other Greeks associate only with men. This isn't about gender equality, it's about breeding strong children for the state. Your wife is essentially a broodmare selected for her ability to produce healthy warriors. The economic reality of Spartan life adds another layer of stress to your existence. As a full citizen, you're granted a kleros, a plot of land worked by Helot slaves. But you're forbidden from engaging in trade, craftsmanship, or any productive labor beyond warfare. Your entire economic existence depends on the labor of people you're trained to kill without hesitation. If your helots flee, rebel, or die, you face the loss of citizenship and reduction to the status of inferior, one of the non-citizen classes who lack full rights. The helots themselves present a constant source of anxiety. They outnumber Spartan citizens by perhaps 7 to 1, and they have every reason to hate their masters. Each year, the ephors, Sparta's elected officials, formally declare war on the helot population, making it legal for any Spartan to kill any helot without legal consequence. This isn't just symbolic. It's a recognition that your society exists in a state of permanent internal warfare. Your daily routine as an adult Spartan citizen revolves entirely around military training and preparation. You wake before dawn in your communal barracks, eat the same black broth that sustained you as a child, and spend your day in weapons practice, formation drills, and physical conditioning. Your body, now in its 20s, already shows the accumulated damage of nearly 2 decades of abuse. Old injuries ache, scars pull tight across muscles, and the constant malnutrition has left you susceptible to diseases that better-fed populations might easily resist. The famous Spartan laconic speech isn't just cultural preference, it's survival necessity. In a society where saying the wrong thing can be interpreted as cowardice or disloyalty, brevity becomes safety. You learn to communicate essential information with the fewest possible words, to avoid any statement that might be construed as weakness or doubt. The wit and cleverness that other Greeks prize in conversation becomes dangerous luxury you cannot afford. Your relationship with your own children, when they come, is dictated by the same harsh logic that shaped your own upbringing. You cannot show them affection openly, cannot prepare them for the trials they'll face, cannot even be certain they'll survive their first inspection by the tribal elders. When your 7-year-old son is taken for the agoge, you must watch impassively as he's led away, knowing that the child you've barely been allowed to know will emerge as either a warrior or a corpse. The religious obligations of Spartan life add spiritual dimension to your suffering. The festivals and sacrifices that mark your calendar often involve demonstrations of endurance and pain tolerance. The Artemis Orthia festival requires young men to steal cheeses from the goddess's altar while being whipped by older warriors. The Hyacinthia festival celebrates a beautiful young man loved by Apollo. But even this celebration of beauty includes military displays and reminders of duty to the state. As you reach your 30s and 40s, your body begins to break down under the accumulated stress of decades of abuse. Joint problems, muscle injuries, and the effects of chronic malnutrition make everyday movement painful. But there is no retirement from Spartan military service, no gentle decline into comfortable old age. You remain liable for military duty until age 60, expected to maintain the same physical standards and psychological readiness that defined your youth. The greatest fear that haunts every Spartan warrior isn't death in battle, which brings honor and glory, but survival with wounds that prevent continued service. A warrior who cannot fight becomes a burden on the state, a reminder of weakness that undermines the myth of Spartan invincibility. Better to die gloriously at Thermopylae than to limp home with injuries that prevent you from fulfilling your only permitted role in society. Your legacy, if you have one, will be measured entirely in military terms, not by wisdom gained, art created, or love shared, but by enemies killed, battles won, and above all, by your willingness to die for Sparta when the moment comes. The individual dreams and desires that drive other human beings have been systematically crushed out of you, replaced with a singular focus on collective military glory that demands the sacrifice of everything that makes life worth living. The physical deterioration that accompanies your life as a Spartan warrior begins earlier than you might imagine. By your mid-20s, your body already shows signs of premature aging that would shock citizens from other Greek cities. Your teeth, weakened by poor nutrition and the habit of chewing leather straps to toughen your jaw, begin to decay and fall out. Dental problems become chronic sources of pain that you must learn to ignore, as seeking treatment for such minor ailments would be seen as weakness unworthy of a Spartan. Your hearing suffers from decades of exposure to the deafening clash of bronze on bronze during training exercises and actual combat. The ringing in your ears becomes a constant companion, making it difficult to hear commands during battle or conversations during the rare moments of leisure. This gradual deafness isolates you further from human connection, adding another layer of suffering to your already austere existence. The scars that cover your body tell the story of your life more eloquently than words ever could. Each mark represents a lesson learned through pain, a mistake punished through violence, or an enemy defeated in combat. Your back bears the permanent ridges of whip scars from childhood flogging competitions and disciplinary beatings. Your arms and legs show the white lines of sword cuts that weren't quite deep enough to end your career, but were serious enough to leave permanent reminders of your mortality. The psychological burden of living under constant surveillance and judgment weighs on you more heavily as you age. Every action, every word, every facial expression is monitored by your fellow citizens for signs of weakness or deviation from Spartan norms. You learn to guard not just your behavior, but your very thoughts, knowing that even a momentary lapse in vigilance could result in accusations of cowardice or disloyalty that would destroy your reputation and that of your entire family. The relationship between Spartan warriors and their weapons takes on an almost religious significance that outsiders struggle to understand. Your spear and shield are not merely tools of war, but extensions of your identity. Objects imbued with spiritual importance through years of daily handling and battlefield use. You know every scratch on your shield's bronze facing, every grain in your spear's ash-wood shaft, every irregularity in your sword's iron blade. These imperfections make your weapons uniquely yours in a society that seeks to eliminate individuality in every other aspect of life. The maintenance of your equipment becomes a form of meditation. One of the few activities where you can lose yourself in focused concentration without the pressure of competition or judgment. You spend hours polishing bronze until it gleams, checking leather straps for signs of wear, sharpening blade edges to perfect keenness. This care is not merely practical but spiritual, a way of maintaining connection to the warrior tradition that gives your life meaning and purpose. The meals you share in your military mess, or secessia, reinforce social bonds while simultaneously serving as another arena for competition and potential humiliation. Each warrior contributes food from his agricultural holdings, and the quality of these contributions reflects on your status within the group. If your helots have failed to produce adequate crops, if your wine is inferior, if your contributions are seen as insufficient, you face social ostracism that can escalate into formal exclusion from citizenship itself. The conversations during these communal meals are carefully regulated by unspoken rules that govern acceptable topics and speaking styles. You learn to communicate important information through indirect references and subtle implications rather than direct statements. Outsiders visiting these dinners often miss entirely the complex exchanges of information and status negotiation happening beneath the surface of seemingly simple conversations about hunting, training, or past military campaigns. The nights spent in the communal barracks bring their own particular form of suffering. Despite spending decades alongside the same men, forming bonds forged through shared hardship and combat, you maintain an emotional distance that prevents genuine intimacy. Vulnerability is weakness, and weakness is death in Spartan society. You learn to suffer in silence, to grieve without showing tears, to fear without displaying anxiety. This emotional suppression creates a kind of internal prison that may be more confining than any physical restraint. Sleep itself becomes another challenge rather than a respite from daily struggles. Your body, conditioned by decades of early morning training sessions, wakes automatically before dawn, regardless of how little rest you've had. The thin sleeping mat offers no cushioning for joints worn down by years of impact and strain. You wake stiff and aching, needing precious time to work flexibility back into muscles that have tightened during the night. Dreams, when they come, often replay traumatic experiences from combat or training. You relive the moment you killed your first enemy, remember the faces of friends who died in battle, or experience again the terror and pain of childhood beatings in the agoge. There is no counseling, no acknowledgement of psychological trauma, no framework for processing these experiences beyond the expectation that you will simply endure them as you endure everything else. The religious obligations that punctuate your life offer little genuine comfort or spiritual solace. The gods you worship are as harsh and demanding as the society that claims to serve them. Artemis requires blood sacrifice and painful demonstrations of endurance. Ares demands constant warfare and glorifies violence as the highest human activity. Even Apollo, patron of culture and enlightenment in other Greek cities, becomes in Sparta primarily a god of military discipline and order. The festivals that mark your religious calendar combine piety with fervor, opportunities for competition and display of martial prowess. The Gymnopaedia, the festival of unarmed boys, requires elaborate choreographed performances that blend dance, athletics, and military drill into exhausting displays that last for days. Participants train for months to perfect their movements, knowing that any mistake will be noted and remembered by the thousands of spectators who gather to watch these demonstrations of Spartan excellence. Your relationship with family members outside your immediate military unit remains distant and awkward throughout your life. You see your wife only briefly in stolen moments that feel more like strategic missions than intimate encounters. Your children grow up knowing you primarily as an intimidating figure who appears occasionally to inspect their progress and departure, offering no warmth or encouragement, only stern evaluation of their readiness for the trials that await them. The extended family networks that provide emotional support and practical assistance in other Greek cities function differently in Sparta, where loyalty to your military mess supersedes blood relationships. If your brother shows cowardice in battle, you are expected to be the first to condemn him. If your father questions a military decision, you must demonstrate your loyalty to the state by reporting his doubts to the evil. This is the reality behind the legend of the 300. These were not superheroes or demigods, but the products of a society so militarized, so focused on warfare, that it created human beings who literally knew no other way to live than to fight and die, for the state that had consumed their entire existence. Leonidas and the road to Thermopylae. The man who would become legend was born around 540 BCE into the royal house of the Aegeid dynasty, one of Sparta's two ruling families. But Leonidas was not destined for the throne. As a younger son of King Anaxandridas II, his path seemed destined for the same military service that awaited all Spartan males, distinguished only by the additional burden of royal blood and the expectations that came with it. Like every other Spartan boy, Leonidas entered the agoge at age 7, his royal lineage offering no protection from the brutal conditioning that forged Spartan warriors. If anything, his status made him a target for other boys eager to prove themselves against royalty. The scars he carried from those early years would mark him for life, each one a testament to the democratic nature of Spartan suffering. Kings and commoners alike learned to endure pain in silence, to steal food without being caught, and to sleep on beds of reeds beside the cold waters of the Eurotas River. The young prince distinguished himself not through privilege, but through the same qualities that marked all successful products of the agoge system. He learned to speak with the laconic brevity that characterized Spartan discourse, to lead through example rather than command, and to view death in battle as the highest honor a man could achieve. These weren't merely cultural values for Leonidas. They were the fundamental truths that would guide every decision of his adult life. Leonidas came to the throne through a series of family tragedies and political machinations that revealed the complex nature of Spartan royal succession. His half-brother, Cleomenes, had ruled for nearly 3 decades, but his reign ended in madness and suicide around 490 BCE. The circumstances surrounding Cleomenes' death remain mysterious, involving accusations of bribery, religious sacrilege, and possible assassination by political enemies. Some ancient sources suggest that Cleomenes had been driven mad by the gods as punishment for bribing the oracle at Delphi, while others hint at a more earthly conspiracy involving rival political factions within Sparta. The succession should have passed to Cleomenes' daughter, but Spartan law required male rulers. Instead, the throne went to Leonidas's other half-brother, Dorius, but Dorius had died years earlier in a failed colonial expedition to Sicily. This left Leonidas, now in his 40s, as the unlikely heir to one of Greece's most powerful thrones. His path to kingship had been paved with the bodies of his relatives, a grim reminder of the precarious nature of power even in Sparta's rigid social system. When Leonidas finally became king around 489 BCE, he inherited a Sparta facing unprecedented challenges. The Persian Empire, under Darius I and later his son Xerxes I, had been expanding westward for decades, swallowing up Greek city-states along the Anatolian coast. The failed Persian invasion at Marathon in 490 BCE had only delayed the inevitable, and intelligence reports reaching Sparta suggested that the Persians were preparing a massive invasion force that would dwarf their previous attempts. Leonidas's marriage to Gorgo, the daughter of his predecessor Cleomenes I, was both personally significant and politically crucial. Gorgo was renowned throughout Greece for her intelligence and political acumen, unusual recognition for any woman in the ancient world, but especially remarkable in Sparta, where women, despite their relative freedom compared to other Greek cities, still operated primarily in domestic spheres. Ancient sources credit Gorgo with several instances of political insight that influenced major decisions, including the interpretation of a secret message that warned Sparta of Persian invasion plans. Their marriage appears to have been one of genuine affection and mutual respect, a rarity in royal unions that were typically arranged for political advantage. Gorgo bore Leonidas a son, Pleistarchus, who would eventually inherit the throne, but she also served as an unofficial advisor whose counsel the king valued highly. This partnership would prove crucial during the crisis that would define both their legacies. The Persian invasion preparations under Xerxes I represented a mobilization unprecedented in ancient history. Ancient sources, though likely exaggerated, describe an army numbering in the millions, drawn from every corner of the Persian Empire. Modern historians estimate the actual invasion force at somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 men, still an enormous army by ancient standards. The logistical challenges of moving, feeding, and coordinating such a force required years of preparation and represented the full might of the world's largest empire focused on the destruction of Greek independence. Xerxes had personal as well as strategic reasons for his Greek expedition. His father Darius had died while planning revenge for the defeat at Marathon, leaving Xerxes with both an empire to rule and a family honor to restore. The young Persian king, probably in his 30s when he launched the invasion, had spent years consolidating his power and dealing with rebellions in Egypt and Babylon. Greece represented not just a strategic objective, but a test of his worthiness to rule the empire his father had left him. The Persian advance began in 481 BCE with the construction of massive engineering projects that demonstrated the empire's resources and determination. Xerxes ordered the construction of 2 pontoon bridges across the Hellespont, each over a mile long and requiring hundreds of ships lashed together to support roadways wide enough for his entire army. When storms destroyed the first bridges, Xerxes allegedly ordered the sea to be whipped as punishment, a story that reveals both the Persian king's megalomania and the Greek perception of Persian hubris. Simultaneously, Persian engineers dug a canal through the Athos Peninsula, avoiding the treacherous waters that had destroyed a Persian fleet a decade earlier. These projects took months to complete and involved thousands of workers, but they demonstrated to both Persians and Greeks that this invasion would succeed where previous attempts had failed. The Greek response to Persian preparations revealed deep divisions within the Hellenic world. Many city-states, particularly in northern Greece, chose to submit to Persian demands rather than face destruction. The process of menacing, offering earth and water as symbols of submission to the Persian king, split Greek communities and sometimes even individual families. Some Greeks genuinely believed that resistance was hopeless against such overwhelming force, while others calculated that Persian rule might be preferable to the constant warfare that characterized inter-Greek relations. Athens and Sparta, despite their traditional rivalry, recognized that they faced an existential threat that transcended local politics. The formation of the Hellenic League in 481 BCE represented an unprecedented level of cooperation between Greek city-states, but it was cooperation born of desperation rather than mutual trust. The League's first major decision was where to make their stand against the Persian advance, a choice that would determine not just military strategy, but the survival of Greek civilization. The initial plan called for defending the pass at Tempe, but reconnaissance revealed that the position could be easily outflanked, forcing the Greeks to fall back to more defensible positions further south. This retreat, though tactically sound, had serious political consequences, as it effectively abandoned northern Greece to Persian occupation. Thessaly, Boeotia, and other regions found themselves in the path of the Persian advance, with no hope of Greek protection. The decision to defend at Thermopylae emerged from careful analysis of geography and politics. The narrow pass between mountain and sea offered the best defensive position available, while the simultaneous naval battle at Artemisium would prevent the Persian fleet from landing troops behind the Greek lines. But the plan required perfect coordination between land and sea forces, and any failure in either theatre would doom both efforts. Leonidas volunteered to lead the advance force to Thermopylae, but his decision was influenced by complex religious and political considerations that modern audiences often overlook. The Carnia, an important Spartan religious festival, was scheduled to begin just as the Persian army approached Greek territory. Spartan law forbade military campaigns during religious observances, the same law that had prevented Sparta from sending significant forces to Marathon a decade earlier. The solution was to send a small force under the king's personal command, officially an advance guard rather than a full military expedition. This legal fiction allowed Leonidas to march while the main Spartan army remained in Laconia for the religious festival. The irony was bitter. Sparta's most important military contribution to the defense of Greece was made possible by a technicality that avoided violating religious law. The 300 Spartans chosen to accompany Leonidas were selected according to specific criteria that reflected Spartan values and practical military needs. All were mature warriors in their 30s and 40s, men with proven combat experience and the physical conditioning to endure extended campaigning. More importantly, all had living sons who could continue their family lines if they died in battle. This wasn't mere sentiment, but practical policy, ensuring that Sparta's genetic and cultural heritage would survive even if its best warriors perished. The march to Thermopylae took the Spartan force through the heart of Greece, passing through communities that would soon face Persian occupation. At each stop, Leonidas had opportunities to gather intelligence about Persian movements and assess the mood of local populations. What he learned was sobering. Many Greeks had already accepted Persian victory as inevitable and were positioning themselves to survive under new masters. The Spartan king's famous response to Xerxes' demand for surrender, "Come and take them," when asked to lay down his weapons, encapsulated not just personal defiance, but the fundamental incompatibility between Greek and Persian concepts of freedom and honor. For Xerxes, surrender was a rational response to overwhelming force, a calculation that preserved life and offered opportunities for advancement within the Persian system. For Leonidas, surrender was literally unthinkable, a violation of every principle that had shaped his existence since childhood. The psychological preparation for what everyone understood would be a suicide mission required a particular kind of mental conditioning that only the Spartan system could produce. These men had spent their entire lives preparing to die gloriously in battle, and Thermopylae offered the perfect stage for that final performance. They weren't tragic heroes forced into impossible circumstances. They were the ultimate products of a culture that valued death before dishonor above all other considerations. The arrival at Thermopylae in August 480 BCE marked the beginning of the most famous last stand in Western history. but it was also the culmination of decades of personal and political developments that had brought this particular king and these particular warriors to this specific place at this crucial moment. Leonidas wasn't just a military commander making tactical decisions. He was the embodiment of Spartan values facing their ultimate test. The final days of preparation involved not just military arrangements, but personal rituals that reflected the spiritual dimensions of their sacrifice. The Spartans combed their long hair, a practice that puzzled their Greek allies but carried deep meaning within Spartan culture, according to their customs. Warriors prepared their hair carefully before battle as an offering to the gods and a symbol of their readiness to die beautifully. The messages sent back to Sparta during these final days reveal the complex emotions and calculations involved in orchestrating a glorious defeat. Leonidas knew that his death was certain, but he also understood that the manner of his dying would inspire future generations of Greeks to continue the fight. He was consciously crafting a legend that would outlive the men who created it, transforming military defeat into spiritual victory through the power of heroic sacrifice. The intelligence reports reaching the Greek camp painted a terrifying picture of the approaching Persian host. Scouts described a force so vast that it took days to pass any given point, accompanied by a baggage train that stretched for miles across the Greek countryside. The Persians brought with them not just soldiers, but entire support systems, engineers to build bridges and siege equipment, scribes to record the conquest, and even historians to chronicle Xerxes' triumph. This wasn't merely a military expedition, but a carefully orchestrated demonstration of imperial power designed to overawe any potential resistance. Xerxes himself traveled in unprecedented luxury, his massive tent city requiring hundreds of servants and guards. Ancient sources describe golden furniture, silk tapestries, and dining services that required entire workshops to maintain. The contrast with the Spartan camp, where warriors slept on the ground and shared simple meals from common pots, couldn't have been more stark. Yet this contrast reinforced rather than undermined Spartan confidence, confirming their belief that luxury bred weakness while hardship created strength. The Persian advance guard included troops from across the known world, each contingent bringing its own weapons, tactics, and cultural practices. Herodotus lovingly catalogues this diversity, describing Scythian archers with their recurved bows, Indian infantry carrying cotton armor, and Ethiopian warriors with stone-tipped spears. This wasn't just military variety, but a deliberate demonstration of Persian imperial reach, showing that the entire civilized world served Xerxes' will. For Leonidas, observing these preparations provided final confirmation of what he had long suspected. This battle would determine not just Greek survival, but the future character of Western civilization. The Persian Empire represented a fundamentally different vision of human organization, one based on absolute submission to divine monarchy rather than the fractious, chaotic, but ultimately free system of competing city-states that characterized the Greek world. Victory was no longer possible, but the manner of defeat would determine whether future generations would remember freedom as a worthy ideal or dismiss it as a dangerous delusion. Archaeological mysteries and hidden truths deep beneath the olive groves and pine forests of modern Laconia. Archaeologists continue to uncover evidence that challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient Sparta. Unlike Athens, with its magnificent Parthenon and sprawling agora, Sparta left remarkably few monumental remains. This absence itself tells a profound story about a civilization that deliberately chose austerity over ostentation, function over beauty, and military efficiency over artistic expression. The most puzzling archaeological mystery begins with the location of ancient Sparta itself. For centuries, Scholars struggled to identify the precise location of the city that dominated the ancient world for nearly 3 centuries. Unlike other major Greek cities, Sparta had no impressive walls, no grand temples, no elaborate public buildings that might serve as landmarks for future generations. Thucydides, writing in the 5th century BCE, predicted this very problem, observing that if Sparta were ever abandoned, future archaeologists would find little evidence of its former power, while the ruins of Athens would suggest a city far more magnificent than it actually was. Modern excavations in the Eurotas Valley have revealed a settlement pattern unlike any other major Greek city. Instead of a concentrated urban center, Sparta consisted of 5 separate villages scattered across the fertile plain, connected by roads but maintaining distinct identities. This decentralized structure reflected the unique social organization of Spartan society, where citizenship was defined not by residence but by membership in the warrior class that could live anywhere within Laconian territory. The most significant archaeological discovery in recent decades has been the Spartan Acropolis. Not a towering citadel like those found elsewhere in Greece, but a low hill containing the remains of temples and public buildings that reveal surprising aspects of Spartan religious and cultural life. The Temple of Athena Chalkiokos, the Bronze House, was described by ancient sources as one of the most impressive buildings in all of Greece, its walls covered with bronze reliefs depicting mythological and historical scenes. Yet archaeological investigation has revealed only foundation stones and scattered bronze fragments, leaving historians to wonder whether ancient descriptions were exaggerated or whether the building was systematically dismantled in later periods. The mystery deepens when we examine the archaeological evidence for the famous Spartan warrior culture. Surprisingly few weapons or pieces of armor have been found in Spartan territory, far fewer than in other Greek cities with less martial reputations. This scarcity might reflect Spartan efficiency in recycling metal, the systematic looting of Sparta by later conquerors, or perhaps most intriguingly, the possibility that much of what we think we know about Spartan military culture comes from later romanticized accounts rather than contemporary reality. The Helot settlements, scattered throughout Laconia and Messenia, present another archaeological puzzle. These communities, housing the enslaved population that vastly outnumbered Spartan citizens, should have left extensive remains if they were as large and permanent as ancient sources suggest. Yet archaeological survey has revealed relatively modest settlements that appear to have been frequently abandoned and re-established, suggesting a pattern of population movement and control that doesn't match the stable agricultural communities described in literary sources. Recent excavations at Thermopylae, just outside ancient Sparta, have uncovered one of the most mysterious cult sites in all of Greece. This location, identified in ancient sources as the Menelaeum, the shrine dedicated to Helen of Troy and her husband Menelaus, contains artifacts spanning more than a millennium of continuous worship. The earliest remains date to the Bronze Age, long before the historical Sparta existed, while the latest come from the Roman period, centuries after Spartan power had faded. The artifacts found at Thermopylae tell a story that complicates our understanding of Spartan values and priorities. Among the offerings deposited by worshippers are exquisite ivory carvings, elaborate jewelry, imported pottery from across the Mediterranean, and precious metal objects of extraordinary craftsmanship. These discoveries seem to contradict the image of Sparta as a society that rejected luxury and artistic achievement, suggesting, instead, a complex relationship with beauty and material wealth that ancient sources either misunderstood or deliberately obscured. The most intriguing finds at the Menelaeum are small lead figurines, thousands of them depicting warriors, women, and animals in styles that span several centuries. These votive offerings provide a unique window into popular religious practices that existed alongside the official state cults described in literary sources. The figurines show evolution in artistic styles, clothing, and military equipment that allows archaeologists to trace cultural changes over time with unprecedented precision. Particularly fascinating are the female figurines, which depict women in a variety of poses and costumes that reveal much about gender roles in Spartan society. Some show women participating in athletic activities, confirming ancient accounts of female physical training, while others display elaborate hairstyles and clothing that suggest a level of personal adornment inconsistent with Spartan reputation for austerity. These artifacts force us to reconsider whether the famous simplicity of Spartan life was universal or whether it applied primarily to male citizens, while women enjoyed greater freedom of expression. The sanctuary of Artemis Orthia, extensively excavated in the early 20th century, has yielded evidence of ritual practices that were both more complex and more brutal than ancient literary sources suggest. The famous ceremony in which young men were flogged while attempting to steal cheeses from the goddess's altar left physical evidence in the form of a unique theater-like structure built to accommodate spectators watching the ordeal. The construction of permanent seating for these events suggests that what began as a simple initiation ritual had evolved into a major public spectacle that attracted visitors from across the Greek world. Archaeological analysis of the bones found in sacrifice deposits at Artemis Orthia reveals dietary practices that contradict the image of Spartan frugality. Along with the expected offerings of cattle and sheep, excavators have found remains of deer, wild boar, and even imported delicacies like sea urchins and exotic fish. These discoveries suggest that religious festivals provided occasions for the consumption of luxury foods that were otherwise forbidden or unavailable, creating a complex relationship between austerity and indulgence that ancient sources rarely mention. The absence of significant fortifications around ancient Sparta presents another archaeological mystery that challenges conventional understanding of ancient Greek warfare. While every other major Greek city invested enormous resources in defensive walls, Sparta remained deliberately unfortified throughout its period of greatest power. Archaeological survey has failed to find evidence of even modest defensive works, confirming ancient claims that the Spartans considered their warriors to be their only walls. This lack of fortification created a unique urban landscape that influenced every aspect of daily life. Without walls to define city boundaries, the distinction between urban and rural space became blurred, allowing the scattered helot settlements to be integrated into the city's economic system while remaining physically separate from citizen areas. The absence of defensive choke points also meant that Spartan military tactics had to emphasize mobility and rapid response rather than the siege warfare that characterized conflicts between other Greek cities. Recent underwater archaeology in the Gulf of Laconia has uncovered evidence of Spartan naval activities that literary sources barely mention. Shipwrecks dating to the 5th and 4th centuries BCE contain military equipment, suggesting that Sparta maintained a more significant naval presence than historians previously recognized. These discoveries force a reconsideration of Spartan grand strategy, suggesting that control of sea routes was considered as important as domination of land territories. The most emotionally powerful archaeological discoveries relate to the burial practices of Spartan warriors. Unlike other Greek cities, where elaborate tomb monuments celebrated individual achievement, Spartan graves are remarkably modest, often containing only the deceased's weapons and a simple inscription giving name and father's name. This archaeological austerity reflects the cultural values that subordinated individual glory to collective achievement. But it also makes it difficult for modern archaeologists to understand the personal lives and individual personalities of the people who created one of history's most influential military cultures. The search for the battlefield of Thermopylae itself presents unique archaeological challenges. Geological changes over 2.5 millennia have dramatically altered the landscape, with siltation from the Spercheius River pushing the coastline several miles seaward. The narrow pass where Leonidas made his stand is now inland farmland, and the hot springs that gave the location its name have shifted course multiple times. Archaeological investigation has located ancient road surfaces and identified the probable location of the final battle, but the complete absence of battlefield debris suggests that the site was thoroughly cleaned in antiquity, either by Persian forces collecting trophies or by later Greeks creating a memorial. The mystery of what happened to the bodies of the 300 Spartans remains unsolved despite decades of archaeological investigation. Ancient sources provide conflicting accounts, with some claiming that Xerxes ordered the corpses to be mutilated and displayed as warnings, while others suggest that Greek forces later recovered and properly buried their fallen comrades. Modern archaeological survey has found no mass graves or other evidence of large-scale battlefield casualties in the areas where ancient sources place the final fighting. Perhaps the greatest archaeological mystery surrounding ancient Sparta is the complete absence of personal documents, letters, administrative records, or other written materials that provide intimate glimpses into daily life in other ancient cities. This absence might reflect the Spartan emphasis on oral tradition and personal instruction, the systematic destruction of records by later conquerors, or the use of perishable writing materials that haven't survived in the Mediterranean climate. Without these personal voices, our understanding of Spartan society remains forever filtered through the perspectives of outsiders and later commentators who may have misunderstood or misrepresented what they observed. The archaeological investigation of Spartan military equipment has revealed surprising sophistication in metallurgy and weapon design that contradicts assumptions about technological backwardness. Analysis of surviving bronze armor fragments shows advanced techniques in metal composition, with carefully controlled ratios of tin to copper that produced bronze with optimal hardness and flexibility. The metal workers who created these pieces possessed knowledge of heat treatment and quenching methods that allowed them to create protective gear lighter than comparable equipment from other Greek cities while maintaining superior defensive capabilities. The famous Spartan shield, the aspis, has been the subject of extensive archaeological and experimental archaeology research that reveals engineering principles, sophisticated beyond what literary sources suggest. The wooden core, typically constructed from poplar or willow, was selected not just for availability but for specific material properties that provided strength while minimizing weight. The bronze facing was attached using techniques that allowed it to absorb impact energy without transferring excessive force to the warrior's arm. Modern replicas constructed using archaeological evidence weigh substantially less than shields from other Greek cities, while providing equivalent or superior protection. The discovery of training weights and exercise equipment at various Spartan sites provides physical evidence for the conditioning programs that ancient sources describe in general terms. Stone weights with hand grips, carefully calibrated in increments that suggest progressive training programs, reveals systematic approaches to strength building that parallel modern athletic training methods. Jumping pits with measured distances marked by stone markers demonstrate that Spartans tracked athletic performance with precision, maintaining records that allowed instructors to monitor individual progress and adjust training intensity accordingly. Recent excavations of what appear to be military training grounds have uncovered elaborate obstacle courses designed to simulate battlefield conditions. While building specific physical capabilities, these installations include walls of varying heights for climbing practice, water obstacles for swimming, training, and rough terrain sections for developing balance and agility. The sophistication of these training facilities suggests that Spartan military education involved far more systematic planning and investment than the image of simple austerity and natural toughness would indicate. The analysis of burial goods from different time periods reveals changing attitudes toward wealth display and social status that complicate the narrative of unchanging Spartan austerity. Earlier graves from the archaic period contain elaborate jewelry, imported pottery, and precious metal objects that demonstrate participation in the luxury trade networks connecting the Mediterranean world. Later, classical period graves show marked simplification, suggesting that the austere lifestyle associated with Sparta emerged gradually rather than existing from the city's foundation. This archaeological evidence supports literary sources describing reforms attributed to the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus, though it pushes the timeline for these changes later than traditional accounts suggest. The discovery of domestic structures in Spartan territory has challenged assumptions about the living conditions of Spartan citizens. While literary sources emphasize the barrack system and communal living, archaeological evidence reveals substantial private houses with multiple rooms, courtyards, and even decorative elements like mosaic floors and painted walls. These structures suggest that while male citizens spent much of their time in communal facilities, families maintained private residences that provided comfort and status display in ways the austere public image didn't acknowledge. The investigation of Helot settlement patterns through archaeological survey and excavation has revealed a more complex social structure than the simple master-slave dynamic described in ancient sources. Some Helot communities possessed substantial stone buildings, organized urban layouts, and evidence of craft specialization that suggests a degree of autonomy and economic sophistication unexpected in an enslaved population. These findings raise questions about the actual level of control Spartans exercised over daily Helot life, and whether the terror described in literary sources accurately reflects the lived experience of these communities. The analysis of agricultural infrastructure throughout Laconia reveals investment in irrigation systems, terracing, and soil management that required sophisticated engineering knowledge and coordinated labor. These improvements suggest that Spartan agriculture was more productive and technologically advanced than the limited descriptions in ancient sources indicate. The ability to support a large non-productive warrior class, while also maintaining significant Helot populations, depended on agricultural efficiency that went far beyond simple subsistence farming. The discovery of what appeared to be schools or educational facilities outside the main settlement areas provides physical evidence for the agoge system that shaped Spartan youth. These structures, identifiable by their distinctive layouts with large open spaces for group activities and smaller rooms for instruction, show evidence of long-term use and periodic renovation. The presence of graffiti, practice weapons, and other artifacts creates tangible connections to the young men who spent years training in these spaces, making the brutal education system described in texts feel suddenly more real and immediate. The investigation of religious sanctuaries throughout Spartan territory has revealed dedications and offerings that demonstrate emotional and spiritual lives more complex than the stoic warrior stereotype suggests. Votive offerings include prayers for sick family members, gratitude for safe returns from war, and requests for divine assistance in personal matters ranging from childbirth to business ventures. These humble objects provide glimpses of individual hopes, fears, and relationships that the focus on military achievement in literary sources tends to obscure. The ongoing archaeological investigation of ancient Sparta continues to reveal new mysteries while solving old ones, painting a picture of a society that was simultaneously simpler and more complex than ancient sources suggested. Each discovery forces historians to reconsider assumptions about Spartan culture, military practices, and social organization, ensuring that our understanding of this influential civilization will continue to evolve as new evidence emerges from the Greek soil. The investigation of ancient Spartan burial practices reveals cultural contradictions that challenge our understanding of their value system. While warrior graves are typically austere, recent excavations have uncovered elaborate family tombs belonging to prominent Spartan lineages that contain luxury goods rivaling those found in other Greek cities. These tombs include imported amber from the Baltic, ivory from Africa, and precious metals worked by master craftsmen. The contrast suggests the Spartan austerity may have been more performative than absolute, a public virtue that coexisted with private wealth and consumption. DNA analysis of remains from various Spartan period sites has begun to reveal the ethnic composition of ancient Laconian society in ways that literary sources never could. Preliminary results suggest a more diverse population than ancient accounts indicate, with genetic markers indicating connections to populations across the Mediterranean rather than the isolated, purely Dorian ancestry that Spartan propaganda claimed. These findings raise fundamental questions about Spartan ethnic identity and the role that ancestry myths played in maintaining social cohesion. The pottery workshops discovered in the Spartan countryside present another puzzle for archaeologists trying to understand the economic foundations of Spartan society. Despite ancient sources claiming that Spartans were forbidden from engaging in crafts or trade, excavations have revealed sophisticated production facilities, creating both utilitarian and decorative ceramics. The technical quality of these products suggests skilled artisans working over extended periods, not the hasty productions of amateur craftsmen working between military duties. Some of the most intriguing archaeological discoveries come from the borderlands between Spartan territory and neighboring regions, where excavation has revealed fortified posts that don't appear in any ancient source. These installations, equipped with watchtowers, signal fire systems, and substantial storage facilities, suggest a level of border security and territorial control that required significant resources and planning. The existence of these forgotten outposts implies that Spartan military organization was more sophisticated and far-reaching than even contemporary observers realized. Recent advances in environmental archaeology have allowed researchers to reconstruct the ancient landscape of Laconia with unprecedented precision, revealing agricultural practices that supported the Helot population and, indirectly, the Spartan military system. Analysis of ancient pollen deposits shows that the region supported far more diverse crops than previously understood, including luxury items like saffron and exotic fruits that would have required specialized knowledge and significant labor investment to cultivate successfully. The discovery of elaborate water management systems throughout Spartan territory has revolutionized understanding of the engineering capabilities possessed by this supposedly simple society. These systems, including sophisticated aqueducts, drainage channels, and reservoir complexes, required advanced mathematical knowledge and coordinated labor forces to construct and maintain. The scale and complexity of these hydraulic projects rivals contemporary works in more technologically advanced cities like Syracuse or Alexandria. Hidden beneath centuries of accumulated soil, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of massive earthwork projects that reshaped the Laconian landscape to serve military and agricultural purposes. These include artificial hills that provided elevated positions for military training, elaborate drainage systems that converted marshy areas into productive farmland, and road networks that allowed rapid movement of troops across difficult terrain. The scope of these projects suggests a level of state planning and resource mobilization that challenges traditional views of Spartan governmental capabilities. The analysis of refuse deposits from various Spartan sites has provided intimate glimpses into daily life that contradict many assumptions about Spartan simplicity. Kitchen middens contain bones from a wide variety of animals, including species that would have required hunting expeditions far from Spartan territory. There's evidence of spice consumption, wine appreciation, and food preparation techniques that suggest a culinary culture far more sophisticated than the infamous black broth that dominated literary descriptions of Spartan dining. Archaeological investigation of Spartan religious practices has revealed a complex theological landscape that ancient sources only partially understood. In addition to the major temples and cults described by historians like Pausanias, excavation has uncovered dozens of small shrines, sacred groves, and ritual sites scattered throughout the countryside. Many of these locations show evidence of continuous use spanning centuries, suggesting religious traditions that predated the historical Spartan state and continued to influence daily life throughout the classical period. The discovery of extensive metalworking facilities challenges assumptions about Spartan economic isolationism and technological backwardness. These workshops produced not only weapons and tools, but also decorative objects of remarkable sophistication, including bronze mirrors, jewelry, and ceremonial vessels that demonstrate artistic capabilities rivaling the best products of Athens or Corinth. The presence of raw materials from distant sources proves that Sparta participated in far-flung trade networks despite official policies discouraging commercial activity. Perhaps most mysteriously, recent excavations have uncovered what appear to be astronomical observation sites equipped with stone markers that align with celestial events. These installations suggest that Spartan priests or scholars possessed sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and mathematics, capabilities that allowed them to predict eclipses, track seasonal changes, and coordinate religious festivals with celestial phenomena. This scientific knowledge was apparently considered so sensitive that it left no trace in surviving literary sources. The ongoing archaeological investigation of ancient Sparta continues to reveal new mysteries while solving old ones, painting a picture of a society that was simultaneously simpler and more complex than ancient sources suggested. Each discovery forces historians to reconsider assumptions about Spartan culture, military practices, and social organization, ensuring that our understanding of this influential civilization will continue to evolve as new evidence emerges from the Greek soil. The elite society and Spartan women. While the 300 warriors have captured historical imagination for over 2 millennia, they represented only the most visible aspect of a complex social hierarchy that extended far beyond the battlefield. Behind every Spartan warrior stood an intricate network of support systems, social relationships, and power structures that made their military excellence possible. To understand the true nature of Spartan society, we must look beyond the bronze and crimson of the phalanx to examine the lives of those who wielded power from palaces rather than battlefields. The Spartan elite existed within a carefully constructed social pyramid that balanced military necessity with aristocratic privilege. At the apex stood the 2 royal families, the Agiads and Eurypontids, whose members could trace their lineages back through carefully maintained genealogies to the legendary Heraclidae, the descendants of Heracles himself. These kings lived lives of carefully orchestrated public simplicity combined with private luxury that would have impressed the Persian nobility they claimed to despise. The royal households maintained elaborate ceremonial protocols that governed every aspect of daily life, from the specific types of clothing worn during religious festivals to the precise manner in which meals were served during state occasions. The kings possessed their own cooks, something forbidden to ordinary Spartans, and these culinary specialists prepared meals that bore no resemblance to the infamous black broth consumed by common warriors. Archaeological evidence from royal dining areas suggests banquets featuring imported delicacies, fine wines from across the Mediterranean, and elaborate table settings crafted by master artisans. The ephors, 5 annually elected officials who wielded enormous power over even the kings themselves, represented a unique form of democratic oversight within Sparta's mixed constitution. These men, typically drawn from prominent but non-royal families, lived during their year in office with privileges and responsibilities that transformed them from ordinary citizens into quasi-monarchs. They occupied official residences, commanded personal guards, and possessed the authority to arrest, try, and even execute fellow Spartans who violated traditional customs or showed signs of political ambition. The ephors' daily routine involved a complex series of religious, judicial, and administrative duties that required extensive knowledge of Spartan law, custom, and religious practice. They began each day before dawn with sacrificial rituals intended to determine divine approval for proposed actions, a practice that gave religious sanction to political decisions while providing a mechanism for postponing or cancelling policies that proved unpopular. These morning sacrifices were conducted in private temples, not accessible to ordinary citizens, reinforcing the ephors' special relationship with the gods. The Gerousia, Sparta's council of elders, consisting of 28 men over 60 plus the 2 kings, functioned as both a supreme court and an advisory council whose decisions shaped Spartan policy for generations. Membership in the Gerousia was for life and carried with it social privileges that extended to the councillor's entire family. These elderly statesmen lived in substantial houses staffed by helot servants and enjoyed access to resources that allowed them to maintain the kind of cultivated lifestyle that Sparta publicly discouraged but privately tolerated among its elite. The selection process for the Gerousia revealed the complex intersection of merit, family connections, and popular approval that characterized Spartan elite politics. Candidates were required to undergo a public evaluation where their physical condition, mental acuity, and moral character were assessed by the assembled citizenry. The voting process itself was unique, with the volume of shouting for each candidate measured by officials concealed in a nearby building, a system that combined democratic participation with practical recognition that most citizens lacked the information necessary to make informed choices about candidates' qualifications. The daily life of a Gerousia member involved morning consultations with fellow councillors, afternoon sessions hearing legal cases or reviewing proposed legislation, and evening social gatherings where the real business of governance often took place over carefully prepared meals shared among families whose relationships extended back for generations. These informal networks of kinship, friendship, and mutual obligation created a shadow government that operated alongside the formal constitutional structures described in ancient sources. The Perioeci free inhabitants of Laconia, who lacked full citizenship rights, formed a crucial middle class that made Spartan military specialization possible by handling the commercial and artisanal activities that citizens were forbidden to pursue. These communities enjoyed considerable autonomy in managing their internal affairs while remaining subject to Spartan military authority and foreign policy decisions. The Perioeci maintained their own local governments, religious practices, and economic systems, creating a parallel society that existed alongside but separate from the citizen community. The most successful Perioeci families accumulated considerable wealth through trade, manufacturing, and specialized crafts, achieving living standards that rivaled or exceeded those of many Spartan citizens. Their houses, excavated by modern archaeologists, reveal sophisticated architectural techniques, elaborate decorative schemes, and collections of luxury goods that demonstrate both artistic sophistication and international connections. These discoveries challenge traditional assumptions about Spartan economic isolation while revealing the complex relationships between different social classes within the Laconian system. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Spartan elite society was the unique position occupied by women, who wielded forms of power and influence that would have been impossible in other Greek cities. Spartan women controlled substantial property, managed complex agricultural estates, and participated in public life with a freedom that scandalized visitors from Athens or Corinth. Their daily lives combined physical training, intellectual education, and social responsibilities that prepared them for roles as partners rather than subordinates in the governance of Spartan society. The education of Spartan girls began in early childhood with physical training that rivaled the agoge in its intensity and systematic approach. Young women participated in athletic competitions, dance performances, and musical training that developed both physical capabilities and artistic sensibilities. They learned to read and write, unusual for women in most Greek cities, and received instruction in mathematics, astronomy, and other subjects considered necessary for managing the complex economic affairs that would become their adult responsibilities. The famous physical training of Spartan women served multiple purposes, beyond the obvious goal of producing healthy mothers for future warriors. Athletic competition created bonds between women from different families and social backgrounds, establishing networks of friendship and mutual support that lasted throughout their lives. These relationships became crucial when husbands were away on military campaigns, sometimes for months or years at a time, leaving women to manage estates, make economic decisions, and coordinate community activities without male supervision. Spartan marriage customs reflected the unique status of women within the social system while serving the state's demographic and military needs. The practice of bride capture, where grooms ceremonially abducted their wives from female communal quarters, symbolized the woman's transition from one form of collective identity to another, rather than her submission to male authority. The bride's head was shaved, and she was dressed in masculine clothing, rituals that emphasized her role as a partner in the serious business of producing and raising warriors, rather than as a decorative ornament for her husband's household. The economic power of Spartan women derived from their inheritance rights, which allowed them to own and control property independently of male relatives. By the 4th century BCE, ancient sources suggest that women controlled nearly 2/5 of all land in Laconia, a concentration of wealth that gave them enormous influence over political and military decisions. This economic independence translated into social authority that extended far beyond domestic affairs into areas typically reserved for male citizens in other Greek cities. The daily routine of an elite Spartan woman involved complex responsibilities that required both physical stamina and intellectual sophistication. She might begin her day supervising the work of Helot agricultural laborers, ensuring that seasonal planting, harvesting, or livestock management proceeded according to established schedules. This required detailed knowledge of farming techniques, weather patterns, and market conditions that affected the profitability of agricultural investments. Afternoon activities often involved social gatherings with other women where political information was exchanged, marriage alliances were negotiated, and community problems were discussed and resolved. These informal assemblies wielded considerable influence over official decision-making processes, as the men who held formal political power were often absent on military duties, while the women who controlled economic resources remained present to observe and influence local developments. The religious responsibilities of Spartan women extended far beyond participation in public festivals to include oversight of important cults and mystery, religions that played crucial roles in community identity and social cohesion. Women served as priestesses at major temples, organized religious festivals that attracted visitors from across the Greek world, and maintained the complex ritual traditions that legitimized Spartan political authority through divine sanction. The training in music and dance that formed part of female education served practical as well as aesthetic purposes, developing the coordination and rhythm necessary for the elaborate ceremonial performances that marked important religious and political occasions. These performances were not mere entertainment, but sophisticated artistic presentations that communicated political messages, reinforced social values, and demonstrated Spartan cultural achievements to both local audiences and foreign visitors. The intellectual capabilities of Spartan women were recognized throughout the ancient world, with several achieving fame as poets, philosophers, and political advisors whose influence extended far beyond Laconian borders. The most famous of these was Gorgo, wife of Leonidas, whose political acumen and diplomatic skills earned recognition from historians like Herodotus and Plutarch. Her ability to interpret coded messages, analyze political situations, and provide strategic advice demonstrates the sophisticated education that prepared elite Spartan women for roles as partners in governance rather than merely producers of children. The social gatherings hosted by prominent Spartan women created informal networks that paralleled and sometimes superseded the official political structures dominated by male citizens. These assemblies brought together women from different families, age groups, and social backgrounds to discuss community issues, share information about political developments, and coordinate responses to challenges that affected the entire society. The decisions reached during these gatherings often influenced the formal policy-making processes through the women's relationships with male relatives who held official positions. The contrast between the harsh military life endured by Spartan men and the relatively comfortable existence enjoyed by elite women created a unique dynamic within. Spartan households that reversed many of the gender relationships typical in other Greek cities. While husbands lived in communal barracks, ate simple food, and owned few personal possessions, wives controlled substantial properties, managed complex business affairs, and enjoyed material comforts that would have impressed aristocrats from wealthier cities. This reversal of typical gender roles created a society where women's voices carried weight in political discussions, where female judgment was respected in economic matters, and where the contributions of wives and mothers were valued as highly as the military achievements of fathers and sons. The result was a unique form of partnership between the sexes that enabled Spartan society to maintain its military focus while ensuring that the complex economic and social structures necessary to support that military system continued to function effectively. The education of Spartan women extended beyond physical training and practical estate management to include subjects that other Greek cities reserved exclusively for elite males. Women learned rhetoric and public speaking, skills necessary for advocating family interests in the informal assemblies where much political business was conducted. They studied history and philosophy, developing the intellectual frameworks needed to understand complex political situations and make informed decisions about alliances, investments, and social strategies that affected their families' fortunes. The musical training that Spartan women received served purposes beyond entertainment or religious ceremony. Women composed and performed choral works that commented on current events, celebrated military victories, and sometimes criticized policies or leaders whose decisions they considered harmful to Spartan interests. These performances, presented during public festivals, provided a socially acceptable mechanism for female political expression that circumvented the official male-dominated political structures while influencing public opinion and policy debates. The athletic competitions for women, far from being merely preparatory training for motherhood, created their own sphere of achievement and status competition that paralleled the military honors pursued by men. Victors in races, wrestling matches, and other contests received public recognition, commissioned monuments, and enhanced marriage prospects that translated athletic success into social and economic advantages. The ability to compete successfully demonstrated the physical excellence and competitive spirit that Spartans valued regardless of gender, creating a culture where female achievement was celebrated rather than suppressed. The marriage customs of elite Spartan families reveal calculated strategies for consolidating wealth and power that rivaled the dynastic machinations of royal houses. Elsewhere in Greece, families arranged marriages not just to produce healthy children, but to link agricultural holdings, combine Helot labor forces, and create political alliances that could endure for generations. The women entering these arrangements were not passive pawns, but active participants who negotiated marriage terms, protected their property rights, and sometimes dissolved unsuccessful unions to pursue more advantageous alliances. The management of Helot labor forces required administrative skills and firm authority that Spartan women developed through years of practical experience. Unlike women in other Greek cities, who might oversee a handful of domestic slaves, Spartan women directed the work of dozens or even hundreds of Helot families whose agricultural labor provided the economic foundation for their households. This responsibility required understanding of crop rotation, seasonal labor requirements, market conditions, and personnel management that made Spartan women essentially agricultural executives operating complex business enterprises. The social networks that connected elite Spartan women created informal power structures that influenced everything from marriage arrangements to military policy decisions. These networks, built through athletic competitions, religious ceremonies, and social gatherings, allowed rapid communication of information and coordination of responses to political challenges. When the official male power structure proved slow or unable to address emerging threats, women's networks often provided alternative channels for organizing collective action and implementing solutions. The religious authority exercised by Spartan women extended beyond participation in public ceremonies to include control of important mystery, cults, and prophetic traditions that influenced major political decisions. Women served as oracles and priestesses at sanctuaries throughout Laconia, interpreting divine will and providing spiritual guidance that leaders ignored at their peril. This religious authority translated into political influence as unfavorable prophecies or divine warnings delivered by respected female religious figures could halt military campaigns or overturn policy decisions. The literary production of Spartan women, though largely lost to history, was acknowledged by ancient commentators as significant and influential. Women poets composed works that circulated throughout the Greek world, earning recognition for artistic achievement that contradicted stereotypes about Spartan cultural poverty. These lost works, known only through fragments and references in other texts, suggest a vibrant intellectual culture among Spartan women that produced philosophical treatises, historical accounts, and political commentaries that shaped broader Greek cultural conversations. The wealth accumulation patterns among elite Spartan women created concentrations of economic power that eventually threatened the stability of the entire social system. By the 4th century BCE, ancient sources report that women controlled as much as 2/5 of Laconian land, a concentration that reduced the number of citizens who could maintain the property qualifications necessary for full citizenship. This demographic crisis, partly caused by female property rights that other Greek cities would have considered dangerously destabilizing, contributed to Sparta's decline as a military power, even as it demonstrated the extent of female economic authority. The diplomatic roles occasionally played by Spartan women reveal their capacity to operate in traditionally male spheres when circumstances demanded. Royal women sometimes served as unofficial ambassadors, negotiating with foreign powers, mediating disputes between Greek cities, and providing counsel on international relations that drew on their unique perspectives and relationships. These diplomatic activities, while not officially recognized in constitutional structures, influenced policy decisions and helped maintain the complex alliance systems necessary for Spartan security. The contrast between the public image of Spartan women as mere breeding stock for warriors and the reality of their economic power, political influence, and social authority represents one of the most striking contradictions in Greek history. While other Greek cities kept women secluded and powerless, Sparta created a system where female capability and achievement were recognized as necessary components of military excellence. This recognition didn't stem from progressive gender ideology, but from the practical understanding that maintaining a society entirely devoted to warfare required capable managers for the economic and social systems that supported military activity. The training facilities for young Spartan women, recently identified through archaeological investigation, reveal physical education programs comparable in intensity and systematic organization to the male agoge system. These sites include running tracks, wrestling grounds, and equipment storage areas that demonstrate sustained institutional investment in female athletic development. The existence of permanent facilities rather than casual training arrangements suggests that female physical education was considered as important to Spartan society as the military training of males. The participation of Spartan women in property transactions, legal proceedings, and business arrangements is documented in the limited written records that survive from Laconian sites. These documents show women buying and selling land, lending money at interest, and entering into complex contractual arrangements without requiring male guardians or co-signers. This legal capacity, unique in the Greek world, reflected the practical reality that women often managed estates for extended periods while male relatives were on military campaign and needed full legal authority to make binding decisions. The legacy of the 300 warriors who died at Thermopylae extends far beyond their military sacrifice to encompass the entire social system that produced and supported them. Behind every bronze spear point stood generations of careful breeding, systematic education, economic planning, and social organization that transformed individual humans into components of a military machine. But that same system also created space for forms of female power, intellectual achievement, and cultural sophistication that challenge simple narratives about ancient Greek society. As we reach the end of our journey through the hidden complexities of ancient Sparta, we can see that the truth behind the legendary 300 is far more interesting than the simplified versions that have dominated popular imagination. These weren't superhuman warriors, but products of a society so dedicated to military excellence that it created institutions, relationships, and cultural practices unlike anything else in the ancient world. The Spartan experiment in social engineering produced remarkable military results, but it also created a civilization that was simultaneously brutal and sophisticated, austere and luxurious, democratic and authoritarian. The contradictions that characterize Spartan society remind us that human communities are always more complex than the stories we tell about them, and that understanding the past requires us to look beyond legends to examine the full range of human experiences that shaped historical events. Thank you for joining me on this extended exploration of ancient Sparta and the world that produced the legendary 300. I hope you found these details as fascinating as I do, and that this deep exploration into boring history has provided the kind of relaxing, informative content that helps ease you toward peaceful sleep. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more lengthy explorations of history's forgotten corners. Your engagement helps us continue creating the kind of detailed, nuanced historical content that our community values. In the comments, let me know what historical topic you'd like us to explore next. Whether it's another military campaign, a different ancient civilization, or perhaps the daily life of ordinary people in some forgotten corner of the past. Until next time, rest well, and remember that history is always more interesting than the simple stories we learn in school. Sweet dreams. And thank you for being part of our growing community of history enthusiasts who appreciate the fascinating details that make the past come alive.